Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on 3 trends every e-commerce leader must watch. My name is Superior Den. I'm part of Accessibee's marketing department, and I'm really excited to welcome you to today's session where we're going to cover some really interesting topics and data that has emerged over the past couple of weeks from a survey that we just conducted. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our speakers for today. As mentioned, I work at Accessibee. I've been here for about 4 years, so hopefully I'll be able to answer questions that come upon us today. But with me are two pretty much good friends. So I'm really excited to welcome Adrian and Kelly. And Adrian, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Sapir, for having me today. I'm Adrian, CEO and founder of Fabe Solution. We are a Shopify Plus design and development agency. We started the agency in 2019, so we've been at this for 6 years now. We are serving brands mostly in the US, in the mid-market segment, so 10 to 100 million in revenue across fashion, beauty, and CPG verticals, and we've been working closely with Accessibee for, I would say, 3 years now.
Awesome, thank you. And you're a great Shopify partner as well. So it's very excited to have your insights here today. And Kelly, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Semino. I am based in Washington, D.C. I'm an attorney, and when I was 16, I was in a car wreck that caused me to become paralyzed, and I've been wheeling around ever since then. And today, I focus a lot of my practice on helping people in the disability community and also helping bridge the gap of understanding accessibility. So I'm happy to be here today to talk more about the legal landscape in web accessibility.
So we have two rock star speakers here today, and I'm really excited to jump into the topic. So why are we really here today? Why is this topic so interesting, and what's all the buzz about? Well, recently, Accessibee surveyed 300 e-commerce leaders to uncover specific trends and shopper behavior. 2025 has been a crazy year if we're looking at AI trends, if we're looking at shopping behaviors online, how we're searching, what we're searching for. So we decided to consolidate all of that into a research that we've done alongside Qualtrics, and they've helped us reach to those e-commerce leaders. On top of that, we've also conducted research or reached out to our community members through Accessibee's nonprofit community, our inclusive product advisory board, to reach out to the disability community and hear their feedback. And this is one of those really exciting opportunities where we get to hear both sides of the business, both the business itself and what are their priorities, and also the customer side from the accessibility lens. So this is going to be a very interesting webinar where we talk both about the concerns of the business, how you can prioritize, and what the community thinks about that. So why don't we get started from here? Before we get started actually with our topics, I am really excited to invite Adrian to share a little bit about his perspectives on the e-commerce industry as a web agency, as the owner of a web agency. Then we'll go into the 3 topics that Accessibee wants to cover for today's webinar. Our research is going to be all live on our website today. We have 7 different reports available there, so you'll be able to reach even more information after the webinar. And then after we go through those trends, we'll have some actionable steps and checklists for you. Finally, we'll close with a Q&A. So Adrian, what do you see for holiday season this year? You're on mute. There you
It
go.
wasn't easy to narrow it down to 4, but these are the 4 that I think are top of mind and the most active. Number 1, conversion rate optimization. With paid media costs up across all channels, optimizing the on-site experience is the growth lever I think nobody can afford to ignore anymore. Every click is expensive, and CRO is no longer nice to have. It's the only way to make rising cost of acquisition sustainable. Um, what brands are doing or the way they're approaching it, having structured A/B testing programs, treating your website as a living experiment, testing, measuring, iterating, focusing on speed, website speed, performance, user experience, usability, clear value communication, and trying to tie back conversion rate optimization outcomes directly to acquisition metrics, cost of acquisition, ROAS, LTV. Number two, compliance as a competitive edge. Um, we've seen an explosion this year in terms of lawsuits, whether it's accessibility or privacy lawsuits, new regulations implemented in new regions. I think that beyond avoiding fines, compliant brands convert better. So that tie back to the first point. Um, Clearer content, better contrast, consent-driven personalization is really improving the user experience for everyone. Um, Here, the thing my brands, my clients, or the people I talk to are doing, they're staying on top of it. It's top of mind for them. They're building strong foundations to begin with, and then they work on it regularly. They keep iterating, auditing, and keeping track of all the things they're doing. AI. AI is the big topic, obviously, on everybody's lips, but I think there are two sides to it. There is what's happening on site. So how can you use and how are you using AI on your website? Conversational search, visual resolution. So think how a piece is going to fit on you, or identifying your skin tone to pick the right product in terms of makeup. Things like this are saying are more and more used and are really helping the moving the experience forward. Um, the last part is offsite AI, generative engine optimization. There are many different words. I think the industry has not yet settled on one term for what this is, but basically, how do you, what used to be SEO, so for traditional search engine, how do you optimize for surfacing your brand and your product in these search AI search engines? So ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, you name it. Um, it matters because AI is pulling content directly into the answers. And if your brand isn't clearly represented, you're at risk of being replaced by whoever is. Uh, so here, the idea is to structure your content for GEO, for generative engine optimization, click product info, Q&A, specs, having the right architecture and metadata and schema markup, and then tracking how you appear in these searches. So think of which prompt people may be doing to surface your brands, and then regularly prompt these and see which brands are showing because of which article, because a lot of the AI engines will tell you which source is helping, and then try to reverse engineer to get to appear. So yeah, I think these are the four key trends that I'm seeing entering into the holiday and potentially beyond.
And I love these because they're very connected to what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the webinar. So I'm excited to jump right into that. For today's session, we're going to talk about how this holiday season isn't just your typical holiday season. It really is a turning point in the e-commerce market with all of the emerging technologies and changes in shopper behavior. And we're going to be connecting the dots today between that business performance and customer experience. So Kelly, in a moment, will cover digital accessibility lawsuits and the compliance space. And I really love what Adrian just shared about compliance basically being the price for market access these days. So we'll get into that a little bit. AI rewriting the rules. So what Adrian called generative engine optimization. What we'll talk about is answer engine optimization and a few different ways that you can make your content and your website and your brand AI ready. And finally, cart abandonment and some of the insights that we got from our research, which I think will be fascinating for everyone here today. So without further ado, Kelly, I'll let you jump right in.
All right, thanks so much. So, a large part of what you have to do as a business owner, I'm a business owner myself, is assessing risk. And so that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, giving you the legal framework of what dictates web accessibility right now. And really, there's quite a few things in the U.S. and abroad. The framework of what we think of when we think of accessibility laws in the United States really is like that the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was passed in 1990, and it set the framework for so many aspects of our public accommodations and what that means. I mean, certainly as a person who uses a wheelchair, like if I'm approaching a building and there's a set of stairs, I'm going to look for the ramp. I'm going to look for the access point. I'm going to look for the elevator. But what does that look like for a person with a disability in the landscape of digital access? Then you also have a lot of other types of laws here and abroad. The Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, that is the technical requirements for anything that receives federal funding. So the government or any kind of business that receives federal funding. And then you also have more, even in some respects, more robust laws internationally. The EAA is the European Accessibility Act that dictates what accessibility looks like in Europe and also applies in the digital space, or the ACA, which is the Accessible Canada Act. And that is what in Canada are the parameters of the laws for accessibility for people with disabilities, meaning that no matter where we go, no matter where our business touches around the world, there is going to be some kind of law or regulation that deals with web accessibility.
And accessibility at the end of the day is really about the people. It's about making sure that they have a good customer experience. So you want to make sure that as many users globally can have access to that.
Yeah, I mean, people are like, why, evaluating risk, but that's one aspect. But to your point, like at the end of the day, it's a good business move because it's the right thing to do. It brings more attention, more people to your site. And I can tell you that the disability community is very brand loyal. And so if they find a site or if they find a brand that really embraces accessibility, like that means something and they're going to be a return customer. So when we're looking at what we know is when the ADA was put into law in 1990, like the digital landscape looks so incredibly different than where we are now, like really in every respect. And so the trouble is the ADA does not, in its very specific terms, list out what web accessibility should be. However, the Department of Justice and court cases that have come through have really started to find that one, websites have to be accessible, and two, what that should look like. And what we've seen is more and more people really caring about this issue. And what that translates to is that when a person is unable to access a website because it was not made in an accessible way, people are holding businesses accountable for that lack of accessibility. And that translation point is that there has been an increasing number of lawsuits being filed across the US related to web accessibility. If you look at the map or the chart on this slide right here, you can see year after year, the number of lawsuits being filed is increasing. And that trend I anticipate is going to continue to increase. There was a 20% increase in the number of lawsuits filed in 2024, and we do think that that is going to continue to increase in 2025, 26, and beyond. When we are thinking about what having an inaccessible site and what that means for a business risk, it means a risk of having to deal with accessibility through the process of litigation. And there's a lot of things that can be done before you find yourself with a demand letter in front of you saying your website's not accessible and we want to hold you legally accountable, or ultimately having a lawsuit filed against you because your website's not accessible. We're projecting that at least 5,000 cases are going to be filed in 2025 related to web accessibility, meaning that there are businesses operating websites that do not have accessibility for people with disabilities, and that a lawsuit would be initiated for them to correct that, their website. And if you were to look at what type of business, what type of website, I should say, is most likely to encounter a potential legal claim, overwhelmingly, it's e-commerce. 69% of lawsuits that are filed related to web accessibility are filed against or websites that are e-com businesses. It kind of makes sense because that's someone's going, they're wanting to buy a shirt, they're wanting to, buy, some type of thing for their dog, whatever it may be. And if they find a barrier in being able to access the website, that's those little things in life that can really get people upset. And so 43% of the Accessibility survey respondents faced an accessibility lawsuit or claim. Over almost half of the survey respondents had that experience where they were given a demand letter or it escalated to an actual legally filed action in court. And that's way too many people. Businesses need to be focused on so many other things and not the fact of the as a lawyer, I'll say it, litigation is complicated, it's messy, it's not fun, it's expensive. And at the end of the day, you're going to go back to having to make your website accessible. So that is why e-com brands cannot afford to ignore accessibility. This is truly a risk that is not worth taking. The inaccessibility is it a very expensive way to exist. And what I mean by that is the average cost of a legal action could be from 5,000 to 25 and honestly even beyond depending on how long it takes. In fact, like there are under some regs in Europe under the EAA, the fines can be as high as 500,000 euro for not having an accessible site. That is real money and that is real consequences for not having an accessible site. And which is why you want to protect yourself. You want to protect your brand. And Accessibility does have that support built in where if you receive a demand letter, if you receive an email or an inquiry saying, your website's not accessible, we may pursue legal action, or in fact, you find yourself in a situation where there was a legal action filed, there is litigation support built into Accessibility's structure. And 78% of the surveyed e-commerce leaders recognized that type of support, that built-in knowledge was very important because if you exist on the World Wide Web, there is always a risk that someone's gonna a claim could be filed, and you want to have the structure and support around you to support that.
Thanks, Kelly. That was really insightful. And I love the point that you made, which is at the end of the day, you're still going to have to go back and make your website accessible. So it's good practice to just get started with it and make sure that you're doing everything that you can along the way. And we'll get into that. But for now, we have a short poll, which I will try to start now. Apologies as I get it ready. And oh, we'll see if it works. Can you see the poll? So how confident are you that your site would pass a formal accessibility audit today? Don't be shy. We're starting to see some responses. Okay, so the majority of the responses that we're seeing right now are moderately to very, which is very interesting. And can I share the results? Yes, I can. Here you go. So you'll see the majority of the responses were in the moderately and very. What did our respondents say? Well, of the 300 e-commerce leaders that we surveyed, 79% were not fully confident about meeting accessibility requirements. They were not sure of this. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about what else they told us about their practices with accessibility as we go along. But the really important insight here, and this is actually from a friend of mine and Kelly's, Josh Basil. He's the community relations manager here at Accessibility. He moderates our product advisory board, and he's also a partner with Kelly at the spinal cord injury law firm. And he said, regulation is no longer a distant threat. It's here, it's global, it's costly. Retailers that delay accessibility risk facing fines and lawsuits that could have been avoided with proactive compliance. And I think that really hones in on that point that you just made, Kelly. So I'm glad that that was seconded by Josh. Let's jump into the next topic. And this is one that I think everyone is burning to learn a little bit more about, which is AI chat and AI search and what that really means for your business. And this is something that a lot of businesses are talking about these days, but what does it really mean? So Adrian, I'm going to pose this question for you really quick. How do you think customers are leveraging AI to increase visibility? What are they doing?
So I think before we get into that, we need to understand how users are leveraging AI chat. And one of the biggest shift is people are no longer searching, they're asking. Instead of typing for best vitamin C serum, they'll say, I have a sensitive skin and I live in a humid climate. What's a good vitamin C serum that won't irritate me? So completely different in nature. The way customers are using it, uh, they are using it to discover. So the way I just described it, they're using it for pre-purchase validation. They will try and verify some of the claims that brands are making on their website. Is this serum really cruelty free? Does this shoe fit for white fit? They will look into details into these trust summaries that are combining product specs, reviews, and real-world feedback. We know that the LLMs are pulling the data from forums, from articles, from the website, gathering, and then summarizing for the users. And then they're also using it for post-purchase support. Many users now ask AI how to use or maintain a product instead of visiting a help page. This is why on your website, structured FAQs and clear instructions matter even more today than they used to, because AI is pulling directly from them. And actually, FAQ is one of AI's favorite type of content because it's very easily intelligible. So AI chat search is becoming, I would say, the first touch point of the customer journey. This is where the discovery, the comparison, the education is happening. So brands showing up clearly in those answers are the ones winning visibility before a shopper ever hits Google or a product page. That I think is
You made
the use
excellent
case. Yeah.
points. That was exactly what I wanted to hear before we jump into this section. And I'm glad that you, the expert in e-commerce, were able to make those points for me. So when we're talking about AI, I do have some data here that we wanted to surface to everyone. Just on ChatGPT, the research shows that there are 1 billion prompts daily. And as Adrian said, I'm probably, a percent of those 1 billion. But when we surveyed our customers, we also found that 60% of shoppers are using, or sorry, we found that 60% of shoppers in the US are using generative AI for online shopping. And that, as Adrian suggested, is for the pre-purchase validation, for comparing prices, for comparing products, ingredients, whatever it may be. And then finally, we found that 78% of surveyed leaders say that AI referrals will be critical. So those e-commerce leaders from the mid-market, from your competitors or other businesses that you're working with or you're purchasing from, are saying that AI will be critical for this holiday season. And I really like that point that you made, that before we even think about how businesses should be using it, we should be thinking about how individuals, how specific customers are using AI to find what they're looking for online. And so what you said, that exact same point of the same structure that fuels accessibility, what makes a website accessible also fuels discoverability. And if your products aren't going to be AI ready, then they're not going to be searchable, discoverable. They'll essentially be invisible to the LLMs and to the wider audience searching. So what does that mean about being AI ready and what can you do about it? So this is where we'll get into a few different tactics for what we like to call answer engine optimization, what Adrian called GEO, SEO, all of those terms coming together. The first one that we have here today, and if you've been to a webinar with Accessibility before, you've probably heard about alt text. This is a descriptive text that you add at the code level to make sure that an image is accessible for assistive tech. So screen reader users primarily, and this will read out what is happening on the website. So rather than an image not having any sort of description and just reading off image or saying blank, you want to describe exactly what is in that image and be as concise but also direct as possible, because AI will also leverage that information as part of the search. When we're thinking about structured data, and this is also what Adrian commented on schema and the markup of your website, making sure that everything is well labeled and structured properly, meaning that you have your headings and titles and headings in the proper structure, that all of your forms and buttons are labeled as clearly as possible to make sure that both people and machines can navigate and promote your products. And the last tip that we have is around product descriptions. And this is actually an interesting one because this is the content that's living on your website. So similar to Adrian's comment about FAQs, you want all of the content on your website to be very clear, very descriptive, and conversational. In the same way that someone is searching on an LLM, you also want to make sure that your content is in plain language in a way that the user and AI will be able to understand exactly what you're selling and who it's meant for. So we do have a little bit of a comparison here for you, the benefits of accessible content versus inaccessible content. And when we're talking about the benefits, it really relates to making sure that you have that structured markup on your website, and that helps with the visibility of both your web page and what you're offering. It helps with conversion, because if you're able to provide more information, more reliable data, more people will arrive at your website and hopefully also make that purchase. And then finally, brand equity. Whatever is more inclusive will also drive a higher equity in terms of what Kelly mentioned earlier, brand loyalty and customers wanting to return back for a better positive experience. When we're thinking about the risks of inaccessible content, well, first of all, as Adrian mentioned, not being searchable or discoverable will really suck if you're putting all that investment into your conversion, but then not seeing the results with those LLM. You'll also be excluding customers, meaning if you're not making your content accessible, you're just not going to be reaching customers who can't use your website otherwise. And that will affect your reputation, brand loyalty, and so forth. So those are some of the key points that we wanted to make today. And now I have another poll for you. Are you actively adjusting your content to be more AI chat friendly? So as I set up the next poll, let's see if I can do that. No. Oh. Seems that I've messed up the polls. I apologize, everyone. Feel free to add in the chat any thoughts or questions about this. But in the meantime, I'll share with you another insight from our survey, which is that 74% of the respondents said that they are already adjusting product content to be AI chat friendly. And when we did ask our community members about this, here's one comment from a nonprofit that supports those with developmental disabilities. They are an independent living center specifically for independent living, so that people with disabilities can live on their own, work on their own, and have that independence to also make their own purchases. So AI depends on the query being worded properly to obtain the correct information, and this is critical for that specific community. And that's just one community out of the entire survey, so we can definitely get into more information about that. But I'm also excited to get into our next topic, which is cart abandonment. And this one was a bit of a doozy. So this is something that a lot of businesses are familiar with, and we'll talk about what the research has shown us. According to the Baymard Institute, they did a study on e-commerce checkout usability and accessibility, and they found that 70% of checkout is lost. And that leads to a loss of potential sales in $260 billion. That could simply be recovered if we were to improve checkout usability. Adrian, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this as an e-commerce web agency.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not surprised at all by that stat. We're seeing it every day. At Faith Solution, when we audit or rebuild websites, checkout is very often where the biggest leaks happen, and most of them are entirely preventable. should I get into more details, or should we keep that for a bit later?
I'll come back to you on that because
Okay.
I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but I also want to share some of the interesting data that we have today. So, when we actually did our research, we found an interesting market contradiction between confidence versus the reality. So, according to that Baymard research, 70% is the global cart abandonment rate. But then when we surveyed e-commerce leaders, 72% of them said that they are confident that their checkout process is optimized. That's really interesting because how can you be confident if that your checkout is optimized if the reality shows that most checkouts are abandoned? And then we get into an even more interesting data point when we see that 40% of the surveyed people haven't audited their checkout process for accessibility in the past year, meaning they have this false sense of confidence in their checkout process and in the usability and how optimized it is, but they haven't audited it for accessibility. And that conversation between usability and accessibility is something that we'll come back to in a moment. But what else we found is that only 62% were concerned about checkout performance, which is slightly different because the performance versus optimizing for accessibility and usability are different things. But when we further honed in on this and asked how you feel about assistive technologies on your checkout page, 1 in 4 admitted that they don't work. So definitely there needs to be more of an effort to audit and check your checkout process. The cart abandonment can be part of that, meaning we can identify the causes, or as Adrian said, the leaks that are happening. Usability is one layer of it, but accessibility is going in even deeper and identifying where that really is happening for a specific community, where the benefits from addressing those accessibility barriers will help usability, will help conversion, will help brand loyalty and customer experience, and we can go on and on from that. Adrian, did you want to respond to that?
Uh, just add a little bit to that. One thing is, I think Shopify is doing a great job at that. So by migrating or build to Shopify or building their e-commerce website on Shopify, I think brands will do 80% of the work. The platform has an incredibly well optimized checkout from a user experience perspective and from an accessibility perspective out of the box. Beyond that, it's the things we've mentioned, color contrast, uh, clear CTAs, also things like shipping costs, discount logic, being as clear and straight to the point as possible to remove any unnecessary frictions. Um, it's maybe one of the most boring parts of optimizing a website, but that's an extremely impactful one.
I love those insights. That was really helpful. And you're right, it's not completely random. There are a lot of friction points and barriers that are happening. So when we're thinking about hidden fees or the extra step or anything that's unclear, even thinking about feedback when you're going in to enter your details and you're getting an error, but it's not clear what the error is, all of those can lead to that lost conversion. And so this is something that you can test, whether through user testing with Accessibeef, through our testing with the disability community. You can test it with our manual testing and customer mediation if that's part of your package, which we'll share more about in a moment. So being able to review that whole process and identify where those leaks or barriers are happening will help you identify how you can recover that revenue and build more customer loyalty.
Just one more point on that before
Mhm.
we continue. The letting people check out as a guest, that's a big topic and debate. People are afraid that doing that will lower the number of people actually creating account and that they will not be able to do proper customer relationship management. Time over time, when we implement that you can let people check out as a guest, so less friction, you don't need to create an account, which often the account section and the creation of the account section can have many usability and accessibility flows. What we notice is increasing conversion rate because less friction and actually an uptick in people creating account post purchase. So the idea is just let them do their thing easily and smoothly. You will win their trust and they will create an account.
I love that. One more thing that you mentioned about Shopify having a really great checkout process. And I love that you shared that, because a lot of times people ask, well, we're using specific templates, or we're working with a specific CMS and we know how to use it. That is all great. And there's this interesting story that I like to share of when I used to manage a website where they said, okay, you're responsible for all of the content on the website. And I started putting in headers and titles all over the place. Forms were not structured at all. Buttons just said click here, no specific identification of what you were clicking on. And so if you really want to make sure that you're optimizing that process, because if you have someone who's clueless, as I used to be, managing a website, you're going to run into those issues. But if you're testing that process and making sure that both with the customer and with the experts on your team, you're making sure that that process is working in a good flow, you're going to be able to recover all of that. Okay, the poll is not working, but feel free to share your answers in the chat, or also just think about this question for a moment. What do you believe is the #1 cause of cart abandonment on your website? Is it unexpected costs, long, complex checkouts, site errors, can't calculate the total up front, or, as Adrian mentioned, maybe it's all of the above? And the insight that we got from our survey respondents is that 87% believe that accessibility best practices at the checkout would improve usability. So it's almost a no-brainer. It's like, yes, of course, accessibility would improve the checkout usability. Yes, of course, doing things to make the experience more seamless will help make the conversions better and reduce cart abandonment. It's about actually testing it and making sure that that flow is working for your website and that it's accessible for all customers, regardless of their ability. And this is a quote that we have from our Access Labs team. So this is actually a really great sort of incubator team from our product department. It's 9 blind analysts who test all and QA all of our products. And they also completed our survey for the community and shared that chances are, if a disabled person has reached your website, let alone the checkout process, we are interested in your product. However, we frequently encounter accessibility barriers, and the more difficult they are to overcome, the less likely we are to make a purchase. So that is directly from the community, and something that I think is really valuable for everyone on this call to understand. So what is the opportunity here? What do we do with all of this information that we got on today's session? Well, I want to first start with sort of key takeaways from you, Kelly and Adrian. What do you think is most important for our audience today to take away from today's session for e-commerce leaders to know? And Kelly, you can go first.
Well, I think that making sure that accessibility isn't an afterthought, go ahead and addressing it. I've seen on my end, again, looking on the legal lens and risk mitigation, lawsuits that have been filed against all sizes of companies, representing all sectors of business, all types of e-commerce brands. And so there's really no business out there that would be protected from that type of risk. And so for that reason, I always suggest that people become very proactive about this, because it is not a risk worth taking.
I appreciate that, and I agree. Adrian, any takeaways that you want to share before we jump in?
I think framing compliance as brand trust and performance, not just doing it for the fear of being sued, like truly be inclusive. I feel like when customers see clear accessibility features, transparent privacy controls, if we think of other compliance topics, it signals professionalism and credibility. It shows you care about their experience, you care about your customers, and beyond checking legal boxes, you're doing the right thing.
Great responses, both of you. Thank you so much. So we did prepare a short checklist, and we have more information in the industry reports that are on our website. So you'll find that we have different reports for each of the different topics that we've done, along with a checklist for those. But as mentioned throughout the call or throughout the webinar today, one of the most important things that you can do for your website is auditing those critical flows, making sure that your website, all of the product searches, the cart checkout process is all tested for accessibility, whether that's with the disability community, whether that's with your returning customers, and with your team, to make sure that it's easy and simple to navigate your website, and especially with those assistive technologies like a screen reader, or if you're using a keyboard navigation. We want to simplify the checkout, remove unnecessary fields or any blockers that would create additional friction for customers, and provide real-time validation. Labeling everything. This was a critical point when we got to the answer engine optimization and the AI readiness, making sure that all of your form fields, buttons, everything has a clear label, that your structures are properly done, and that your product content is all very, very clear and conversational in a way that AI can pick up on it. Design for clarity. So this is also making sure that your color contrast, your font size, the order that you've structured your website, the schema markup is all optimized. And finally, leveraging feedback. And this is actually one that kind of connects back to what I mentioned at the beginning of testing with the community, but there's two different ways to look at feedback. One is if you're doing the checkout process and you're completing your information and you're seeing error reports and you're not sure where that's coming from, offering that sort of feedback in real time will help the user identify what they need to do to move on to the next step. But then also thinking about feedback from the community, feedback from your users, feedback from those who are visiting your website, to make sure that you're continuously optimizing and making sure that your website is ready for those customers. So those are a few points that we wanted to share with you today. As mentioned before, nearly 8 out of 10 respondents had shared that litigation support is very important for them. And when we're talking about e-commerce, which is the industry that receives the most amount of ADA web accessibility litigation, we want to make sure that they are aware of our solutions and how we can support them. So Accessibility does have a litigation support package along with a 15K pledge, depending on the size of your package. You can review that with your sales rep or reach out to us on the website. Additionally, we do have manual testing by accessibility experts and custom remediations. So if you want to test specific user flows, you can either go the user testing route or have those specific custom remediations done with our team. And of course, we do have AI-powered solutions. Access Widget is the one that you're probably most familiar with, but next month we're going to be doing another webinar about Access Flow, which is a very exciting new product about leveraging AI to enable accessibility at the code level on your website. And it has an auto resolve capability, and it's just phenomenal. So we're really excited for that webinar next month. We do have some case studies on our website on top of the industry reports. We definitely recommend you learning a little bit more about them and how our different customers have either faced litigation and leveraged our litigation support package, or what they have done to protect their clients from it. And I just want to close out our session today with sharing that accessibility best practices, the small things that you're doing they're not so small, but the things that you're doing to make sure that your content is accessible, that the structure of your website makes sense, that it's all keyboard navigable. So someone who's not using a mouse will be able to click through it with their assistive technology. All of that will help make your website better for everyone. And we really appreciate you joining today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And without further ado, we'll jump into some questions. And I have a few ready. So this one is for you, Adrian. And we talked about this a little bit, but what do you think is going to happen through the rest of the year or going into next year? What are you recommending to your clients to prioritize?
I'm gonna go back to one of the things I said, which is generative engine optimization. We're barely seeing the beginning of it. If you're paying a close attention to your tracking in Google Analytics, you're seeing traffic coming from GPT a little bit. This has happened because you got lucky, or because you got the right articles out there, or because you were doing a lot of SEO efforts. But this is just the beginning. This should be really top of mind. You should educate yourself. You should track which prompt you're ranking for, and you should optimize your website to show up more and more in these engines. I think at the moment, only ChatGPT is adding UTMs to the links sending traffic. So that's the primary one you're capable of traffic or of tracking. Most of them will follow. Um, so I would say that's the number one thing I would tell my clients to focus on, to be ahead of the curve. This is going to be a tsunami of new free traffic.
Like that. And Kelly, if a brand is nervous about the litigation and compliance space, but they want to get started, what's your recommendation to them? Like how can we get started on addressing all of these changes that are happening in the market? It sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is like recognizing that it's a priority that needs to be addressed. If it's not a priority or if it's not something that has been addressed already, the right time to start is now, because it being proactive, not only, again, coming into the holiday season, understanding that there are risks that exist, but understanding that there's a wide market and the disability community is ready to be able to have that access. I don't know, Sabir, if you know offhand, but like the portion of the World Wide Web that is currently accessible is what, like maybe 3-4%, maybe not even that.
I think it's gone up to 4.
It's up to 4 now. It's 4%, which means like 96% is not. And that's like a really daunting number for so many people just trying to do things like, online grocery shopping or whatever in their daily lives that everyone else is, utilizing it, like having that space open. And so, as a person from the disability community, I can say, like, having companies look and address things without you having to bring it up means a lot, and they're going to come back again and again. But also, understanding that with the trends, like people are tired of having to navigate in a totally inaccessible space. And what we see is like the disability community wants to make that change. And if it requires the lawsuits, it looks like the trends are they're going to do it. But there's so many functions, so many ways that can break it down. Again, I'm a business owner. I don't know anything around the tech space, so giving that to a company to take care of and manage for you, it's a very easy step, and it's going to make you focus on the things that really matter, which is running your business, not assessing risk.
I'm really excited for this space and where we're going with it. And I really appreciate the answers that you just gave. For everyone who's on the call today, we have plenty more data points and research ready for you on our website. It is all under the industry reports section of our website, which I'll share now in our chat. And we invite you to take a look at those reports. They cover the topics that we touched on today, which is litigation, AI search, and cart abandonment. But we also talk about hyper-personalization, voice commerce, and the compliance space happening and the compliance changes that are happening globally, including the European Accessibility Act, which Kelly had mentioned before. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's webinar, and have a really good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Sapir.
Thanks.